Hello and welcome to another How to Level Up video. This time we're going to be looking at Wild Mode and we're going to be looking at Rogue. So in Wild Mode, things are they're very different from Standard Mode. People do sometimes try and play Standard decks in Wild, but because there's so many combos to essentially get out like minions well before much like lower mana level, um, a lot of different decks tend to predominate. And essentially, like, this deck is a really cool deck. I'll tell you like the main way that this deck kind of like cheats out the mana earlier, and it has to do. I'll also tell you about a few different variations to it. It has to do with Necrium Blade. What you can do is if you get Necrium Blade, especially if you get it on the Necrium Apothecary. I should really have two of these in here, but I actually don't have the second one. I'd probably swap it out for a Necrium Vial. You can also put Spirit, bring it, Umbra, or whatever in it. So what you can do is, if you can, on 3, you do the Necrium Blade and attack. Then if this Necrium Apothecary, if it gets the Death Rattle from the Silver Vanguard, you're basically going to be pulling one of these guys, the Kel'Thuzad, Ragnaros Sneed, or Lich King out. And that can be like a huge, like on like turn 4 or 5, that can be massive. Interestingly, like, even though I'm probably going to swap this card out, if you put this on it as well, if they can't remove that Necrium Apothecary and it's got the 7, you can literally get all your 8 mana cards out, so like turn 6, and then it's like, I mean, that's it, right? Especially because remember, you've got the counterfeit coin as well, so that will also help to get stuff out earlier. And Hanar is like, it's kind of like an interesting one. Like, you're not always going to, sometimes it's just it's got a decent stat line, especially if you're playing like an aggro deck. It's got a decent stat line, and it's it will, if you don't want to take too much damage, like early on, you don't want it to, you know, snowball up to a higher amount, then it can be sometimes used to put that out. Sonya's Shadow Dance is also really useful in terms of you can get like a lot of really good, a lot of, obviously in a Death Rattle, I mean, it's funny because it's a Death Rattle deck, but it's not an Enzoth one. But you can get a lot of really good, you can get like, I've had like several Lich Kings out. And you can also kill your own minions as well, which is also kind of useful. Like if you've got a 1/1, you could backstab it. And if it's got like a really good death rattle like Sneed or the Vanguard or even Sylvanas as well, you can use that as well. If they've got a really good minion, sometimes if I did do an interesting play actually where I just sort of like they had like the 2/8 the Malygos aspect of magic. I couldn't kill it, but I just sort of like gave it a little bit. I backstabbed it and I put Ziliax into it. And then the next turn, because the next turn they were like, well, they played, I think they played the 6/5 dragon that gives you a dragon, and so and then I killed the then 2/2 Malygos aspect of magic, and I got the dragon with the death rattle. So there's lots of like ways that you can have like really interesting like turning points in the game, and that is sort of like, that's where you sort of have to think like, what is the point when the opponent is going to go slightly more aggro, and can you sort of try and manipulate them into doing that? And the way to do that is often like, if you say, because if you're holding, because normally like the thing is like, this deck really works well at like turn 5 or 6, so you don't necessarily always have to do like, sometimes you can not backstab a minion even if the minion is there to be, I mean, for one, it can combo. If you say you don't have the coin, you could do backstab, counterfeit into Necron Apothecary. And also this deck rate would have a really high win rate if I had 2 of these. I will get to the second one soon, because it's such a good combo, and as well as but yeah. So cheat deaths also can be quite useful. Obviously you don't want it to be pretty much any minion you get, with the exception of the Cavern Shiny Finder is a pretty good one to get. But often early game, you just play the secrets. Even if you don't have Shadow Jeweler, you can't just wait for Shadow Jeweler, right? This card really has been a revelation since it's come out, because it's like, it just gets those combos more likely early on. Also, another reason not to do too much early game is if you have like a counterfeit coin and you're not really pulling much in the way of the cheaper stuff, you may want to sort of hold on to it for that. Now, of course, we have the Kobold Illusionist. So this is like I would say always keep this in the opening hand, because you don't really know what minions you're going to get. especially if you get this and you just get a load of spells, like this can be really, really useful. To obviously, if you pull Cavern Shiny Finder, you can't play this, right? But assuming you don't, you can. For one, you could actually get it with Eviscerate. That's probably less common, I would say, than just backstepping a 1/1. Obviously, there's all sorts of interesting combos that. Another thing to point out is that Kel'Thuzad, obviously those 1/1s, if they die, it'll be resurrected as a full fully healed minion. But yeah, this can be very useful. Obviously, again, you're going to probably want to get the Silver Vanguard on the Death Rattle. But yeah, I mean, but Necron Apothecary really is a good card. You have to just look at like, and one of the things as well that isn't necessarily that obvious is that when it says trigger the Death Rattle of a random friendly minion, it's not just selecting. This is something which, like, that I was thinking about. It doesn't just choose a random minion on the board, and if it doesn't have a Death Rattle, you just get nothing. It will choose from the Death Rattle minions on your board. So that's actually a much more powerful effect than if it just triggered a Death Rattle of a random minion and it didn't first check that it had a Death Rattle, right? That's something important. And obviously you can use that with the Illusionist as well. In general, Necreon Blade, you're always going to want that early game. The reason why the Shiny Finder is here is to get that. Because there's always going to be this combo where you can attack and you can sort of like slow down the beginning a bit as well. Like if you really are not pulling the cards. Another thing as well, and then you can sort of slow, just use your regular hero power, right? Another useful thing to do with this as well is if you do have a Death Rattle minion and you are only on the first use, you can always just hero power and destroy the weapon early. So, okay, you're not getting an extra 3 damage on the following turn, but you could be pulling, Ragnaros. So it's like, it's pretty obviously like a thing to do, and you have to sort of balance those things. But yeah, if the game is going longer, sometimes like I had a game that was very, very slow to start. I was actually able to turn it around with the Shadow Jeweler later on. Obviously, Cheat Death is very useful. This is an interesting one, actually. If, like, I'm not sure, but I don't believe, right, if you just coin into Shadow Jeweler, obviously against Rogue, I think they potentially could eviscerate it, right? But most classes, or you could do backstab into SI7. There's probably, against Rogue, probably is a little bit sketchier. But you can actually just coin into Shadow Jeweler and then play Cheat Death rather than the other way around. Because that's the thing, like, the reason you'd want to do that, because obviously you think, oh, well, why not just do Cheat Death and then I can play Shadow Jeweler and then I'll get it back immediately. But the reason you might want to do that is because then you can coin Shadow Jeweler, then play Cheat Death turn 2, then turn 3, you could play like a really good mage spell, like that secret that summons a 4-cost minion on their spell. So that's also an important thing to realize, that probably if you coin turn 1 into Shadow Jeweler, you'll probably be able to keep it. It was obviously easier when this was a 1/5, but yeah, I mean, and that's really just like about it. Trying, each of these legendaries, they do get their. This is also quite good to get on Cheat Death as well, because then it's 1 as well. But yeah, there's just lots of good plays you can do. You can also, if you're low on health, you can Ziliax on a Sneed as well, Magnetic rather, and yeah, all sorts of interesting combos. I would say, just to go through the opening hand, obviously you want to keep Counterfeit Coin, Backstab, Cavern Shiny Finder, and Necreon Blade as well. I'd like to keep Illusionist. You basically don't want to keep anything which is high cost. Anything, I'd say, I mean, apart from the Necreon Apothecary, that's probably the only 5. But anything beyond that on the list here. Because remember, if you've got a coin, or you've got a counterfeit coin, you can get this out on turn 3, turn 2 potentially, I suppose. And I do like, I mean, this is really fun to use if you can get, but I think it's just not reliable enough. I'd probably keep, the thing is I haven't got Spirits, Bringer, Umbra or whatever either, so probably I'll just swap out one Necreon Vial for another Necreon Apothecary, and we'll see how that goes. But yeah, that's how to level up. So thanks for watching.